Grand Theft Auto San Andreas is one of my favorite Grand Theft Auto titles of all time. I first played the game when I was a kid, and now as an adult I still chuck it on and have some nostalgic fun. It's not just me who feels this way, many others feel like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas is the definitive Grand Theft Auto title. It still remains so popular to this day, even being given a second remaster, but how? How has a game that came out in 2004 been able to remain so popular for so long? Well, in this video I'll be attempting to answer that question. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas was released in 2004 by Rockstar Games. The game took place in the fictional state of San Andreas. While other Grand Theft Auto games took place in one city, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas took it one step further by having three distinct cities. Sunny Los Santos, which is a fictional depiction of Los Angeles, San Fierro, which was based off San Francisco, and Las Venturas was based on Vegas. The story follows CJ, a member of the Grove Street gang who is returning back to San Andreas after the death of his mother. The game follows CJ rise through the criminal underbelly. Well, that was a brief introduction to Grand Theft Auto San Andreas if you didn't know already. But let's get straight into the gameplay. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas was massively innovative. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas was massively innovative for the time in the use of the open world sandbox formula. While the previous two Grand Theft Auto titles pioneered the open world game genre, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas built on top of that and made it its own. The Grand Theft Auto experience is something that is abstract, but I feel like is important to understand. Due to the nature of the game being a sandbox, anything and everything can happen. I think multimediality builds this experience. Joost Rassen said in their analytical framework on games, it stated how multimediality creates the experience of gaming. The different aspects from the sound design to the gameplay to the graphics all build the experience of the game. The Grand Theft Auto experience is built upon this. Let me explain. You're driving away from police with a 3-star wanted level. The in-game radio starts playing Wreck Yourself by Ice-T, and you feel like a true gangster. That's multimediality building the Grand Theft Auto experience. But speaking of gameplay, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas purely is a great game. The combat and driving mechanics are a bit dated, but what can you expect from a game published in 2004? But they are still solid and functional. But the part that I think keeps people playing the game is the story. The story even today is engaging with plenty to do, while the mission structure is fairly repetitive. Drive here, shoot this guy, drive away. The story keeps you engaged and the missions have a decent amount of variety. Even though I mentioned the repetitive structure before, the impressively detailed world Rockstar were able to create with 2004 technology keeps the game exciting and interesting. I would also like to mention the role-playing elements of the game, such as skill meters for different attributes for your CJ, like the expected driving and shooting, but there are also ones like weight and strength. It made the player feel like they were in more control, something newer Rockstar titles have been lacking. I'd also like to mention the open mission structure. Most of the time you have a task and you can complete it in different ways. Whilst yes, some missions are more structured than others, you had more choice in the way you completed certain missions. This is basically removed from modern Grand Theft Auto titles, which are more like you sitting on a narrative roller coaster where you can't deviate too far from the crafted story. But how much of this love for the game can we attribute to nostalgia? Well, a fair amount. For at least me, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas is an extremely nostalgic game. Everything about it reminds me of being a kid and playing the game for the first time. From driving through the mountains remembering I once tried to look for Bigfoot, to stomping on prostitutes. It really reminds me of my childhood. I do attribute a lot of the fondness this game receives to fans feeling nostalgic about the game. Everything from the iconic soundtrack to the retro graphics and the fact that the game is one of the best selling of all time. It was bound to make an impression on at least some of the people who played it. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas is widely considered to be a masterpiece. Critics and fan alike can agree, but not everyone felt this way. The Grand Theft Auto series has always been controversial. Seemingly with every release of a new game, they were in the news cycle again, being an example of the moral panic involving video games. But Grand Theft Auto San Andreas would be one of the most controversial yet. I'll give you 3 words that everyone familiar with Grand Theft Auto series knows. Hot coffee mod. The hot coffee mod wasn't just at the time the biggest controversy to happen to the Grand Theft Auto series, but also gaming in general. It changed the way games are rated to this day. The hot coffee mod was unused assets found in the game files that were found by data miners. It was a fully functional sex minigame. Yeah, you heard it right. The game about murder, money, and drugs also had a hidden sex minigame. Truly a gangster's paradise. Rockstar co-founder Dan Houser spoke on the Hot Coffee mod, saying it was intentional. To summarize his statement in this Eurogamer article, he and the team at Rockstar wanted to push any and all boundaries. Movies and films can depict all aspects of the human experience, including sex. So why can't video games as an art form do the same? But knowing that with this content, the game would receive a higher age rating, the developers locked it away in the files. Speaking on the reasons, Dan said, he understood Western culture's tolerance towards violence and intolerance to sex. But when those hackers found this and released their findings online, it caused an absolute shitstorm. The mainstream media took this story and ran, showing how video games are ruining young people's minds. The ESRB started an investigation on the matter. This single moment changed gaming forever. The ESRB, who are in charge of giving games age ratings, made a policy change that required publishers to show any and all files in the games even if they could not be accessed. Rockstar during this time, when the game was given an adults-only rating, lost a lot of money, as retailers refused to stock the game until a different version removing the hot coffee mod was released. And even a grandmother sued Rockstar Games for having this sex minigame in a game she brought her grandson. Even with all of this, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas is still one of the most sold games on the PS2 at the end of its life cycle. PS2 was the best-selling console of that generation. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas changed how games were rated, but also had a lasting impact on gaming as a whole. Grand Theft Auto innovated already the existing open-world platform that existed. Pioneered by its predecessors GTA 3 and Vice City, the open-world genre of games is one of the biggest in the industry today, and may have not been without these three iconic titles. While technically Grand Theft Auto San Andreas was just a more refined version of those other GTAs, it did have one massive impact on the industry. Carl Johnson, CJ, the main character of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, was the first black main character successfully made in the gaming industry. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas was the first game to accurately represent not just street culture of the early to mid 2000s, but also an African American lead. Rockstar games have always been tongue-in-cheek in the way of social commentary. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas is no exception. A social commentary of not just America, but hood and gangster culture, which was heavy in the mainstream at the time. Rockstar also gave light to social issues such as police violence against African Americans. One of the main villains of the game, Officer Tenpenny, is a corrupt police officer who arrests CJ. Some have pointed blame to Grand Theft Auto San Andreas for enforcing harmful stereotypes of black people though. But I also feel like something else is keeping the Grand Theft Auto San Andreas so cemented in the memories of the gaming audience. It's participation. It's a main fundamental of all games. The audience is actively participating while playing, but great games have you participating when you're not playing. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, since its release, has built a massive community of fans and became a cultural phenomenon. From early machinima using the game to create their own content, to Grand Theft Auto having so many memes come from the game. It's a testament. The fact that I'm even making this video is contributing in some way to this phenomenon. Maybe all of this contributed to the continued success of San Andreas. Anyways, tell me what you think in the comment section below, and goodbye. Have a great day.